Welcome to A Voice and Beyond. We have Ken Bozeman and Joanne Bozeman. I'm so very excited to have you here. Welcome. How are you?
We're
Good.
fine.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's evening for us and morning for you, as for the
Yes.
States.
Yes, I know. And it's always a challenge having to navigate these time differences, but we get there. And I'm so glad that we were able to work it out because I know I've been making a joke of I have the king and queen here, but it's like we have vocal pedagogy royalty in the room. The king and the queen of vocal pedagogy. Look, you are both a remarkable husband and wife duo. And I'm here to honor your professional legacies, celebrate your love story, and invite meaningful conversation where our audience can get to know you both a little better. And I'd like to start with your musical origins and your personal journey. So, Ken and Joanne, what first drew you each to music, and when did you realize it would become your life's calling? And I'm going to start with ladies before gentlemen here.
Okay.
Good.
I grew up in a really musical home. I was blessed in that way. My mother was a violinist, my dad was a pianist. They sang. We sang around the house. I heard so much, many different genres of recorded music. I sang in the cherub choir at church all the way up, so it was just part of the fabric of my upbringing. Actually, there are four children in my family, and 3 out of 4 of us are teaching musicians. So we were
Wow.
pretty imprinted by all that. I fell in love with classical singing when I was in high school and always loved all kinds of music, but I really got jazzed by it when I was in high school. And then I decided I wanted to study it in college. So I went to university. I was a voice major there. And then I started teaching when I was a junior. So I was about 20. So I started teaching very, very young, and I realized I didn't have the voice with a capital V or the temperament with a capital T to, pursue a singing operatic type career. But I started really liking teaching from immediately, and I just never stopped. So I realized I was more of a teaching type person, but
Yes.
performed also a great deal over the
Yes.
years. So that's my
Okay.
story.
And Ken, what about yours?
I did not come from as musically rich a family as Joanne. My dad was a lovely church choir tenor, and my mom played piano a little bit. But my early years were basically in a church music program and a little bit of school music program. By high school, I had a good ear, and I started studying piano early. So my musicianship was developing, and my voice gradually was developing. And I did some musical leads. I sang Billy Bigelow in Carousel, something I probably had no business singing, but my senior year in high school. Anyway, and then I went off to school expecting to be a church musician. But when I got there, I really had not lived in a town that had an orchestra or an opera program or anything. I really knew very little classical music other than my piano music. But I heard classical singing for the first time, became very enamored of it, and my interest grew there. So I did an undergraduate degree in voice performance and then a master's in voice performance. And then I got a Rotary Fellowship to Munich, Germany, where I studied at the Hochschule für Musik in München with the tenor Ernst Häfliger, who's sort of a Bach Mozart tenor. And then came back and married this lovely thing. And then by that point, we both sort of realized that we loved teaching. And my voice had developed nicely enough to land a teaching job, but I knew I was certainly not ready to try to launch a performing career. And I felt that similarly that I was happier teaching and performing as a teacher than trying to do it solely as a performer. So that's basically how I
Yes.
got to this point.
Now, you talked about you met this lovely thing, and we're talking about the lovely Joanne. Do you remember when you met, and was there music involved at that time?
Yes,
Let me
but
hear
not
your
not
story.
okay.
That's
Well,
all.
not in the way you might expect. So I was a lowly sophomore, and he was a first year graduate student. We studied with the same teacher, and we had overlap of some of our classes. But my mother actually kind of picked him out for me because she there
Not
was
an
an
arranged wedding.
no, she would have if she could have, I think, but it all worked out. Anyway, she was it was an early music performance group, and she was a good violinist and singer, so she would drive into university and was in that group, and he was in it too. So she realized, oh, he's got a nice voice and he's nice looking, and Joanne, what about this Kenny Bozeman guy? And I knew I respected his musicianship and his voice and all of that, but I wasn't, like romantically interested at that time. But that changed within a few months, right?
Yeah, I invited her over to dinner at some point, and that was actually
Oh,
we had met in classes and in school, but that was kind of the start of things.
yes. Oh, that's a lovely story.
By the way, we because we both loved German Lieder, we liked all kinds of songs. We became friends with a German professor at the university who liked to have host Liederabende, and so we would sing evenings of tag team leader singing basically together with a lovely pianist that we worked with who has since passed away much too early. In fact, she was in Australia when she passed away. Paula Fan, a wonderful pianist who was our collaborative pianist and a vocal coach. And she was touring with the British baritone in Australia when she passed away suddenly of a heart attack in her
Oh,
hotel
wow.
room.
Oh, that's
But
tragic.
it is, but she was a wonderful friend and colleague and collaborator. And we did a lot of lead recitals together with her.
Yes. Oh, okay. So there was music involved in your story. There was a common love of that music that you shared as well. So you both had extraordinary careers and you're both highly successful in your own right. So I'd like to ask you, what's been your greatest joy professionally, and what's been your greatest joy personally?
Those are hard questions. Well, in performance, I had to stop performing some years ago, and I can talk about that if you like later from a health issue. But when I was performing, it sort of combined, I said I thought I was going to be a church musician. And so my personal faith journey is very important to me. And I loved singing oratorio since I was a teacher. Singing opera was not going to happen very easily because you had to go for long stretches of time and leave your students. And I taught undergraduates that need a teacher regularly there. But you can do concert work because those are usually weekend gigs and are shorter. So I ended up singing, I sang lots of messiahs. I ended up loving to sing Bach. I sang the tenor of the evangelist roles in the two Bach passions that are done many times, actually. I did the arias a few times of the St. John in particular. So I love to sing that repertoire, which put together, one of my personal convictions with this wonderful music and these theatrical settings. Those were highlights of my singing life. Of my teaching life, of course, I'm very pleased to have students that do well and get to go and listen to them sing. And
Yes.
it's even more satisfying or gratifying when they actually come back to me to work some more, as if I still have things to tell them of use, and to find out that, oh my goodness, I do, even though my whole career was teaching vocal babies, in other words, the 18 to 21-year-olds,
Yes.
the young professionals that come back to me, I'm still able to leverage that knowledge for a more advanced situation. So that's gratifying. And of course, I'm very gratified that people think I have useful things to say in my writing. So that's been gratifying.
Yes. What about personally?
Oh, well, we have 3 beautiful children, 5 wonderful grandchildren.
Oh,
We all get along very well together. We actually had
beautiful.
a very easy go of it. Our children were way better than I deserved, probably more what she deserved. But at any rate, they were just really lovely, and now they're lovely friends, as well as still our children, of course. we just spent a week with part of that family
Yeah.
this
Yes.
past week. So
I totally resonate with that. I feel like my greatest success has been my children. The proudest moment of my life are my children, and they too are great friends. And I did have an easy time of it as well. They were just remarkable from the time they were born and didn't give me a moment's problem. They were just beautiful kids, and they're beautiful. I have two girls, and they're outstanding young women. So very, very proud, and I totally get that. And Joanne, what about you? Your highlights professionally and personally as well?
Oh, professionally, I mean, I'm very gratified that I got to sing a lot of wonderful music, and a lot of it with him. And that was, we collaborated a lot.
Wow.
So even though we live in a relatively small metropolitan area, we did many recitals. I worked at a church and got to sing a lot of wonderful oratorio rep, and so that was lovely. And teaching my students along the same lines, I'm very proud of those who have, a lot of them gone off to good graduate programs and young artist programs. A good handful of them are speech language pathologists, which makes me extra happy. Many of them are teachers themselves, so I'm very, very proud of them, and some of them are having careers of various kinds. That's all very gratifying. And
Yes.
the writing part of the thing, the doing, our book and how it's reached female singers in a very important way, continues to roll out. And then personally, I just have to, same thing, our children, they are the best of the best.
So that was a ditto there.
Yes, a ditto.
Yeah, definitely. So as a couple, it sounds like, you obviously have had an enduring love and a shared purpose. So how long have you been married, and what do you believe is the secret to that longevity?
We've been married almost 48 and a half years.
Oh,
So we're coming up on,
congratulations.
thank
Right.
you.
Incredible.
just
20
after Christmas of 76.
Yeah. So in 2026, it will be our 50th.
Wow.
And I was a baby. We were pretty young.
Yes.
when we got
Obviously,
married.
you weren't even born yet.
Right. I had children at the age of 5.
Right, 25
Yeah.
and 23 or 2.
I was 22 and a half.
22, 25, yeah.
We were pretty young. Sometimes think, how did that work? How did that work out?
Yes. It was a
we
different time, though, don't you think?
Yeah, I
Right.
guess.
It was
we
a
also had good
different-
models. Yeah, our parents had long lives together,
Right.
and that was maybe part of it. Let's see, what's our secret? We talk about this. We're interested in the
Yeah.
same things. I think a lot of
Yeah.
it is that we just we like the same things. We
We have similar values.
right.
If I were to go there, not trying to push anything that you don't want in the interview, but I had experienced a very close couple that I was close to. Was actually a mentor of mine in college that went through a very painful breakup. There were children involved. And this was a person that I revered and respected greatly. It was as humans go, a very decent person. Both of the couples were. And it struck me that if they have this struggle, I'm going to mess this up royally
Yeah.
if I don't have some help. So quite frankly, this became a faith and prayer project that the fellow up there's got to help me out to do this right, because I'll mess it up, I'm pretty sure. So I would say we've gotten a lot of grace and mercy. And I think relationships need that, because as you know, when you live with someone, you have to work at it. But we've been very fortunate in that regard as well. So
Yes, as you know, you just talked about that mentor of yours going through that difficult breakup, and most marriages do end up in divorce. And my husband and I have been together 35 years, and we've had ups and downs in our relationship. And one of the things that we've had to navigate in our relationship is there have been times when one of us have had like a growth spurt where we've kind of propelled a little further in the way that we think about life, the way that we navigate life, and the other has been left behind a little. Have you ever experienced that where you feel like, oh, this person is kind of, in terms of personal growth, at a different place than what I'm at? And that could be that spiritual journey that you're talking about also, that you feel that even though you love one another, there can be that incompatibility because, oh, I'm just in a different place in terms of how I view life.
I'm unaware of that. We've certainly together had to work through challenges to our lives. I don't know that we've ever had an interpersonal challenge that rose to the level of, oh my goodness, this might not work.
We're growing apart,
No,
and I
we've
got to
not had
find
that.
where that, not
Yes.
exactly for us, though I understand how that happens.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's just, again, mercy more than ability involved in all of
Yes.
that.
Yes.
And so my wife is perpetually curious, and she is an avid reader. All of my children fortunately inherited that characteristic. They're all serious readers. They plow through books. I read vocal pedagogy and boring, stuff. And so she knows so much more than I do about so many other areas. She downloads it then to me over breakfast and over. So I get,
Yes.
the Reader's Digest version of whatever she's interested in at the
He
moment.
feigns interest pretty
No,
well.
that's kind of what's goes on in this house.
Yes. Yes.
And she tolerates my pedagogy focus very well because she also has an interest in that. But
Which is helpful.
right,
Oh, yes.
right.
Yes. Yes. If I shared vocal pedagogy with my husband, he would think I was speaking in a foreign language.
Our children had to put up with
Yeah,
it,
they sure
unfortunately.
did.
They got it for both of us.
Yes. I don't know how you do it working together. Honestly, I think I would kill my husband if we worked together. We just work so differently. We have completely different personalities. And oh, yeah, he's very reactive, whereas I'm like the kind of person you want to have on your side when things don't work out the way you hope they would. I'm very calm. So yeah, we would not work well together.
Well,
And
we do, our minds work differently. Very differently. And we recognize that. And sometimes it's, yet we have to be patient about that. But most of the time it works out fine. As far as the work situation, well, she had a different studio down the hall from me. So we weren't
Not really competing.
working together in that sense. We both went to the same school. We're 2 doors apart. We each teach our students. Then we come home and we're together at home.
And talk about the lessons.
We talk about how the lessons went that day, right? And what would you do with this kid? And what would you do with that kid? But this is the funny way we explain it. I was the chair of the voice department at Lawrence for 26 years of my 43 years there. And she came on board at the same time. Actually, she was hired by my predecessor, but then her career there started as my career as the chair of the department started. So we would say, or I would say, well, I'm the boss at work and she's the boss at home. But then she would retort with, you weren't really my boss at work. So that's how that played out.
that's
That's
okay.
academia, right?
Yes, it is. Unfortunately, it's the hierarchy. There has to be some kind of hierarchy there. It's unfortunate that you're married to yours.
Not much, though. Not much.
Department chairs really had very little power. We just pushed paper around mostly when we weren't teaching our lessons.
So both of you, obviously, you have some kind of shared mission. So how do you think your shared mission and values show up in the studio? Teaching 2 doors apart from one another. Do you share core
here's
values as teachers?
Oh, yeah,
Absolutely,
of course.
absolutely.
Yeah.
In
Yes.
fact, even though we had somewhat different paths for a time, we've had a lot of teachers in common and a lot of pedagogic journeys in common. We hear singing very similarly. When we hear a singer, we both observe the same thing that we would want to work on, the same things we really love, the same things that we don't like so much. So that's been very useful. That's not been a problem. And we both appreciated each other's singing when we were singing. We liked each other singing, we sang together, and we blended together very well, vocally and musically. All of that was a mercy because it's not a given, it's not a given. It just was fortunate that that happened.
You just said that there are things that you both like and things you both dislike. Can you share that? That would be very cool to hear what those are.
With regard to singing, it's amazing how much we think we hear the same things. We'll listen to hear somebody just casually, and I'll say, I think that blah 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 blah, and he says, I agree. And it's just, I think our ears have been just schooled over the years.
Yes.
How we're different. I think we're just very different personalities. And I think if you were to watch us teach, you probably would hear that we're going for the same thing, but going at it a little bit different.
Yes. Yes.
He has a kind of gravitas about him that I don't have.
She's more fun.
Well, I'm a little bit of an airhead sometimes.
Hey, join the club. I like to bring the fun and the joy and the entertainment. I was an entertainer for 35 years, and I don't think you can beat that out of me.
I know one thing I did that he's never done. That was back when I had a camera with us. We were using cameras, little tiny camera on the tripod behind me, and I use my hands a lot when I teach. And I remember trying to get something like this going, and I remember looking at my student, and she had all of a sudden this look of horror came over her face, and she kind of went, and all of a sudden I got bonked on the head. I knocked the camera over onto my head. Of course, this was being recorded, and I said,
I like that.
I called her Jane. I said, Jane, this is not going to show up on any recording online or anything. And she goes, oh no, I would never do that, Mrs. Bozeman. It made the rounds, I know.
Oh, I would have laughed out aloud, I have to admit. And I would have shown concern, but I would have definitely laughed out aloud.
I would have stories around about me. I know all my kids.
First of all, check in that there's no concussion, and then go away and laugh. So as you said, you both taught in higher education for many years. Have you had a profound aha moment with a student that's left a lasting impact?
I'll jump in on this one. I did think about this question particularly. I don't think I've had one. I think it's one realization that happened several times with some of my students, and I can't tell their stories, but I've had some students over the years who had good voices accompanied by some challenges, and that might have been a learning disability or neurodiversity or a chronic whatever.
Yes.
And I just learned eventually to not set limits on my expectations of what people can do. If I think about it too hard, it will make me cry, because I have, these kids just blew me away with their tenacity, their growth, tremendous growth as human beings and as singers. And I think that was my aha moment.
Yes.
Eventually I said, show me what you can do. You show me, and I will be along for the ride. I will help you sing in the best way I can, and all that other stuff. You just show me. And
I love that.
It's delightful to think about those particular students.
Yes, I love that. I think that's been one of my biggest mindset shifts as a teacher over the past few years, is not placing limitations on what a voice can do, and just use the fun of exploration and curiosity to see where they can end up. Let's just see where this is going to go. Some things are going to work, some things aren't going to work. But hey, let's not place limitations here, and let's just enjoy the journey and the process. I love process. What about you, Ken? Do you have aha?
Yeah, I don't have a single one either that popped out. It's more, every time you help a student find a freedom so that they can express beauty, and they realize it and they experience it. I will say this occasionally. This is probably just me, but I will occasionally have a student that step forward in what they're doing and make such a beautiful sound that I tear up. It's like, why do I react like that? This is what I do all the time,
I do that.
It's just like, why does beauty of soul and sound just devastate sometimes.
It's a chill bump. The chill bump thing. It's
Yeah.
just, that's
Yes.
not something you can manufacture. That is
Yes.
absolutely spur the moment, innate
Yes.
reaction to something.
But don't you think too, in that moment, that you discover or you remind yourself the privilege of the work that we do, that we were there to help create that with that student. We helped them find the way forward. We didn't make the sound for them, but we led them and we guided them in some way to that sound and that privilege. I always feel like it's a privilege as a teacher that I was there in the room with them.
Yes.
That I think tears me up also. Not just the sound itself, but being a part of that journey. I just go, how lucky am I? What joy. So Ken, you've been a leading voice in acoustic pedagogy. How did you get into the science aspect of voice training? What led you there?
I'll quote one of her students, says, I didn't mean to.
Oh, yeah. That's like me. I didn't mean to become a teacher.
I didn't mean to do it. When I first started studying at Baylor University as an undergraduate, and I first heard Fritz Wunderlich and Jussi Björling, who were two of my favorite tenors, and there are many other wonderful tenors I've heard, I didn't know a human voice could do that sort of thing. And I heard in particular a recording of Björling singing a particular phrase where his voice did the thing that happens in the upper voice of a tenor when it turns over, and it was just so stunningly beautiful. This was in the days of the vinyls where I pick up the needle and put it back and play it over and over and over again. What is that man doing? And so I recognized there are transitions in the voice that need to happen for it to work that way. I want to know what they are. So I got, as an undergraduate, I didn't make a lot of headway on that. I had a lovely human being for a teacher, but he was unable to help me solve that issue at that point because I was starting pretty much from ground zero. You had a nice voice, but not a straightforward tenor voice. I didn't have a comfortable tenor range yet. So I, just had a sort of church choir voice without, I had to figure it out and learn how to do everything from scratch. I did begin to access more range, but was fairly troubled passaggio issues. And then I went to graduate school and I began to have an occasional experience where the voice behaved better, but I didn't know what to do with that. But it was that transitional sound that I always was listening for in other tenors. What I would say where the voice was turning over on a vowel so that it felt easy in the high. And so I started studying pedagogy, just reading to figure out how, because for my own voice to work better, because I figured if I can't figure it out, how can I teach it?
Yes.
So, I worked on that and things continued to improve gradually, but not remarkably, but well enough. And I was a good musician. I was a good academic. I was top in my class pretty much all the way through on the academic side, but I didn't put a lot of stock in that because I knew I was just good at regurgitating. You give me the information, I can give it back to you and, make good grades. But I really wanted to figure out this thing, but I did it well enough to get a job, which is lovely. I got a lovely teaching job here and I was singing and doing some reasonably good singing, but I still hadn't really cracked the code, so to speak.
Yes.
I took a sabbatical. I took two short sabbaticals, one with Bruce Lunkley in Texas, and he helped me with certain aspects. Lovely man that's passed away. And then the second one was in 1989 with Richard Miller.
Oh, wow.
At Oberlin. I'll skip the long story and go to the short story. So while I was there, I was studying with him, covering a sabbatical of someone that was on sabbatical at Oberlin. So that I could be there to study with him. And I was working in his laboratory where he had spectrography and reading pedagogy and watching him teach and so forth. And I'd studied his work. And he had talked about, he did the Italian technique of the zono di passaggio, the primo passaggio for a tenor at about D4, and the secondo passaggio at about G4, and everything sort of happens in that zona di passaggio, that transition zone from D to G in the tenor voice. So I expected I would enter some transition and then come out of it in my upper voice on the G. I would enter it at the D, come out of it on the G. I was in a lesson with him, singing some song, and an A vowel, A, not A,
Yeah.
turned over on D4. And it was like that, it was a new sound and a new sensation. And I thought that's kind of unusual sounding on the inside. So I said, Richard, was that okay? He said, well, was what okay? I said, what just happened on that on that D4? I don't know, do it again. So I did it again. Said, yeah, it's fine. That's all he had to say about it. Because his ear, he knew what sounded right. And I was freaking out because I thought that was supposed to happen a fourth higher. So I go back to the lab with the K-allometrics spectrography, and I started playing around with my various vowels and noticing, that transition wants to happen in some pattern that looks parallel to first formant locations I've seen in Sundberg. As I was reading. I said, well, so my A vowels and my O vowel were turning over, at the bottom, the primo passaggio, and my A near the secondo passaggio, and the others in between. But E and U, first formants, are way down there. Something must happen to them way low in my range. I go down there, and I was like, whoa, yeah. So that was my big aha moment in terms of pedagogy. But I should mention this, before that, in 1981, this was 89, 1981, I went to a NATS convention in Minneapolis, and Tom Cleveland, who's a lovely man,
Yes, I
had
know
a
the
BA in
name.
voice, went into speech habilitation and rehabilitation work. He had presented at NATS on the singers formant cluster and the pitch of the singers formant cluster relative to vocal fa.
Mm-hmm.
And he played a synthesized tenor voice singing an ah vowel on an F major scale. And it did that turning over thing at the top end of that as it went above the top F. And I said, that's what I'm trying to figure out. So I went up to him afterwards and said, Tom, what did you program? I probably said Dr. Cleveland because I was younger.
Yes.
What did you program to create that color change in that ah scale? I just put in the formants for an ah vowel and ran the scale up. And I thought, it's not laryngeal, it's acoustic, because the computer has no larynx. It's just inputting frequencies and relationships between frequencies and resonances, programmed resonances of a vocal tract, a faux vocal tract. I didn't know what to do with it at the time, but it made me think, I've got to study the acoustics more.
Wow.
So then the solution to that came in 1989 in Oberlin, when I realized, oh my goodness, the voice doesn't turn over on the same pitch for every vowel. It turns over on different pitches for vowels, and it is related to the pattern of first formant locations. And I eventually sorted out that was when the second harmonic, an octave above the pitch you're singing, crosses through that first resonance and first formant area. And that launched my journey, and that helped me sort my passaggio completely. It helped me begin to teach it well to students, and it took me a little bit later to figure out what to do with treble voices. Similar Paranel phenomenon, an octave higher, from close to whoop timbre, what labels that I came up with. The open timbre and closed timbre were just my versions of voce aperta and voce chiusa, the Italian terminology. And then the whoop was my decision to not, because Donald Miller had been studying this as well, and he used the term yell timbre for taking an open timbre too high. So I was looking for a vernacular term like yell that people could relate to, and I ended up with whooping. Whooping is what you do at sporting events. Woo, woo, woo.
Yeah.
It's the octave equivalent of turning over, avoiding the yell by turning over, and then going into whoop an octave higher. So eventually it helped me sort out how to train passaggi of every sort for both treble and non-treble voices. That's a long version of how I got into the acoustics.
So what I gathered from that, it started out by you trying to work on your own voice and trying to figure out what was going on with you.
Right.
Joanne, when he talks about this stuff, do you know what he's talking about? You do?
She's heard it enough.
You've heard all the stories and everything.
I've heard him present a lot. I've read the books, so I've absorbed it.
But you've heard the sounds and the singers.
I've heard the sounds.
That's the crucial piece.
Yeah.
That is the crucial piece. And I think for me, that's what's missing for me. Even though Brian Gill has said to me, Marissa, you do work with acoustics. By the adjustments that you've described to me that you make in your singers, You
Right.
are working with acoustics with every singer. I just don't know that I am. I just know
Yeah.
that by changing a particular vowel sound or making a shift in the vocal tract, there's going to be differences. And I've just figured
Right.
out what they are, but I've never studied it formally.
That's
Yeah,
okay. If it's working, it's working.
it
It's just,
seems to be. Yeah.
yeah,
But I
the
suppose
principles.
it'd be nice to put labels on things. But how much of that do you use in the studio? And how do you make sure that science doesn't overshadow the individual singer's needs and goals in the studio?
They're there to learn to sing and to express art from their souls. I don't talk performance and harmonics in voice lessons. I talk feelings. I get at the changes I want them to make. I'm mostly using affect, caricature voices, expressions, but I can talk at least about vowel colors because that's how
Mm-hmm.
we arrange this. We don't micromanage the shape. We go for output targets, a certain color of sound or vowel, and a
Mm.
sensation, and that organizes the mechanics of it for us. So I don't think my lessons are sciencey.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody else could sit in and tell me if they are, but I don't think they are. But
Yes.
I know what I'm after very clearly now, what's got to happen where with each vowel. I know why that happens because of the
Yes.
acoustic work. But
Yes.
how I get the student to do that is
Mm-hmm.
very metaphorical,
Yes, I love that because
sensorial.
you have talked about the voice being the muscle to the soul. So in applying vocal acoustics, I mean, I suppose it's important that we stay rooted in some kind of student centeredness rather than those theoretical ones.
Right. Yeah, it's like anything else. You can obsess on something and then download that on your students, but that's not really what we're there for. Once the mechanic knows how to make the car tuned up well, then it's just to know about how do you drive this thing, how do you put the pedal to the metal? How do you get this thing to go? So
Yes.
that's the procedural knowledge part, which is what it feels like to do the thing, what it feels like and sounds like, and what it's expressing.
Mhm.
Those are the pieces that the student really needs. Once they get that, sensation working, then if they're not interested, they don't have to learn about the formants and the harmonics and the
No.
resonances and yeah.
No, no. So, Joanne, it's to you now. You've been sitting there very patiently while we talk about acoustics. Your work on voice changes in midlife is groundbreaking. You co-authored the book with Singing Through Change with Nancy Boss and Kate Frazier Neely. So tell us about how the book idea came about.
I didn't come up with the book idea, actually. I had been really interested in it. I had written an article, done research, and produced an article for a classical singer in, I think, 2005. And that was all kind of when I was in the midst of my own experience.
Mm.
And I accumulated that information. I was always happy to talk to women who were going through similar things. But my voice eventually stabilized. And so I just kind of put all that on the back burner and continued with my life. But then I think it was 2018 at a NATS convention, and I knew Nancy Boss, and I remember sitting at a talk at NATS, and off to the side, she slipped into a chair beside me. She leans over and she says, "Kate Frazier Neely and I want to write a book about singing through menopause. What do you think? You want to join with us?" And I
Oh,
went,
wow.
ooh.
Yes.
We didn't get started right away, but we had a conversation later that summer. And what got me really hooked on the idea is they said, we want to present what the research is showing and all that, but we really want to base it on women's stories. And that's what the book is Singing Through Change, Women's Voices in Midlife, Menopause, and Beyond. Not women's voice, but women's voices. Because it's a form of qualitative research. It's not academic style, but it's qualitative research is what we learn from them. And we ask them about not just their voices, but about their whole lives and, what brought them to singing and so on. So we have 56 different singers that we interviewed.
Wow.
Of ranging from, I think the youngest was about 38 through, I think the oldest was like 88. So we had a 50-year span. Some of our colleagues in academia had done dissertations on elite singers in this period. we wanted to open up to all kinds of singers and not just classical singers. So we have many different genres of singer and experiences of singers. Some of them had absolutely no problem with their voices during this time. And I think that's one of the things I need to always stress when I talk about this is there's a spectrum of experience. And there are some singers that have absolutely no difficulty with their voices, or they're singing in a style that helps them navigate it more easily than some other genres, but they aren't really complaining about big time problems. And then you'll have some that kind of middle of the road. Yeah, I had to modify some things, but I got through it okay. And then some singers really, really struggle for some reason. I was one of those for some reason. So I hear
Yes.
you.
Yes, me too. Me
Yeah.
too.
So, and we'll never know exactly why some struggle more than others. Well, we might know a little bit. But anyhow, I went through it quite alone. Well, he was very supportive, but he's a man.
Yeah.
And I did have it.
No offense, Ken.
Right. I did have a teacher friend who was very helpful during that time. I think it would have been a lot harder without her feedback and support. So at any rate, I just feel like that the subject, we just need to get it out of the shadows. And it continues to be in the shadows to some degree. And that's a rolling population, right? Like me, I sort of went through it and then I was beyond it. But there's always women coming up, and not just women, but anybody who has a menstrual cycle, of course, anybody that does. So it's always going to be a new thing for people to learn about. And so we just, we keep presenting and talking at conferences and trying to be public about this and sharing basic information. And it's very important that teachers know about this.
Yes.
I don't care what gender you are, you need to know about it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the greatest thing that I've discovered talking to Nancy, I've had Nancy on the podcast and Kate, but the biggest thing that I learned about that I didn't know about was perimenopause. I had never studied at university. I'd had a 35-year, very successful performance career as a gigging singer, at one stage doing 11 gigs a week for 3 months. Wow. My voice was really robust. I was belting. I was singing pop and rock styles all that time. I find myself in a university setting, and I was going through perimenopause, possibly menopause, didn't really know, hadn't figured that out. I didn't have time to even worry about that part of my life. And my voice started misbehaving. It wasn't cooperating. I was struggling to hit some of the notes that I had no problems in hitting previously. My intonation was not so good. I was just singing slightly under.
Right.
Apparently, I was singing with a low larynx. I'd never sung with a low larynx because we don't sing with a low larynx in pop and rock styles. There were all these things. And I was very disheartened. And I remember at the time thinking to myself, have I been fooling my audiences all this time?
Oh, yeah. That is so typical. You start to blame yourself and question yourself.
I did, because this teacher wasn't kind and had no understanding, had no empathy, but was basically saying, you're singing flat. I'm going, I've never sung flat my whole career. Like, I was always commended on my pitch and how accurate my pitch was. That song's too high for you, but I've sung that song for 35 years in that key. So all these things started to happen, and it was in an academic setting. My first experience having formal voice training, and it really knocked the wind out of my sails, and I stopped performing. It really took its toll on me. And I'm still trying to find my way back to my voice in whatever capacity it works now, whatever it's meant to sound like now. So it's interesting. I think that's really important. The work that you've done is really, really important. But when you wrote the book and you were gathering these stories, what was a commonality amongst these stories? And what was your biggest surprise that you've discovered in gathering this information?
I can't say that there was a commonality just because their stories were so different. and they were all in different stages. The commonality was that singing is important to them, right? That was the commonality. I think what surprised us was how the high percentage, higher than we would have expected, of those who had either a voice injury and that could be, or something like paresis, which is not really an injury. And that's one reason we really caution singers at this time of life, because we think it possibly could tilt toward a vocal injury when the voice is compromised. When the voice is compromised, it's very tempting under those circumstances to either make the voice feel like you're used to, and then you might compensate, right?
Tongue retention.
Something along those lines, jaw, tongue, whatever. And then, or you're being asked to sing maybe in a choral situation where you're not comfortable. It could be too high for you at this point, but then you push through, take one for the team, and then you yell at your daughter the next day in an argument, and then something happens,
Yes.
So we want very much to prioritize basic vocal health.
Yes.
But making sure it's a holistic thing. It's hormones, yes, but it's also your general health. During that time, thyroid issues can pop up. You need to have those looked at. That affects the voice, can affect the voice. So it's a lot of those stories were more complicated than we expected. But there's one story that he's heard many times.
Yes.
I was talking to a colleague of mine at university who is a sociologist. So she was involved in qualitative research as well. And I told her, I said, we're getting all this information from these amazing women. I said, but it's a lot messier than we expected it to be. And she said, well, actually, that's good, because if it's not messy, I won't believe you, because that's what real life is like.
Exactly.
So
yes.
I continue to talk to different kinds of singers about their experience, and I'm very gratified that they'll share their information. A woman's or a singer's experience who sings opera may be different from someone who sings Broadway or country and western or whatever. But those are the commonalities where I love the way you said that. Your voice wasn't cooperating.
Yes.
That's not a bad way to put it. My
yes.
voice, I always felt like somebody put a new larynx in my neck. This is not my larynx anymore. That's what it felt like. It just didn't behave the way I was used to.
Yes, it's like you can hear the sounds that you used to make, but for some reason you can't replicate them. And that's how I feel even now. I feel like I can still hear my old voice and I can still feel it in my body, but it's not coming out the same way anymore. And I suppose for many women going through either perimenopause or menopause or beyond, that they feel unheard, or suddenly they feel invisible. People don't see them anymore, or they don't listen to them anymore. So how can we better support female singers through this natural and quite often very misunderstood transition?
I think that if they hear that other singers are going through the same thing, that's very helpful, because otherwise you're kind of left alone with those feelings that you described. Like, oh my gosh, I've been faking it all along, or maybe I never have been a good singer after all. And
yes,
just hearing another person say, oh, I felt the same way. I hope that at this point maybe your voice feels different, but perhaps it's more predictable than it used to be. That's one thing that can happen after menopause, after things settle in, after, actual menopause, that is a year after the periods stop. It can take a while to settle in, but the voice may feel different, like you have to live in a different neighborhood, vocal neighborhood.
I like that.
But it's not as coming and going and different every time you think about it. That's something to look forward to for most people. And they may regain some of the functions in different ways, but it may feel like a different voice.
Yes.
And I don't think that's too unrealistic to think that. Some women are able to use hormone replacement that can mitigate some of these issues. Some women can't take it. So it's not a panacea. But for teachers, they need to understand this so that they don't accuse, like, I'm sorry you had someone that didn't understand you were in a physiologic change that was causing this. and that it wasn't your technique or whatever, or your musicianship.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that all teachers should understand the basics, and I have to just plug the book because the basics are in our book.
Yes, yes.
And so that's a good place. All that information is in one place. They don't have to go look it all up. It's based
Mm-hmm.
on research that we have. So, and just be positive, believe what the singer is saying about the voice and not try to talk them out of it, because we know what we're feeling. And then just very patiently work through. You may have to, I like cross-genre training for singers, particularly classical singers. And I like just exploring some new repertoire, just put on different music, and it sometimes can be very helpful. Just try something different. And look ahead and don't just think back on what all the things you used to be able to do, because there may be some things you are going to be able to do better than you used to.
Yes, it's so weird because the thing that's happened is I've actually experienced an increase in range
Yes.
because all of a sudden I have access to M2 or head voice, whatever people want to call it. I'm not a terminology snob. So all of a sudden I have an extra, at least an octave and a half to what I had prior when I was only singing in chest voice and belting. And the other thing I love that you said is how you feel it in your own body. And that's something that I always discuss with my students is I'm not going to tell you how it should feel because I'm not in your body. And whatever you feel, that is your right to feel. And you can explain it to me in whatever language works for you, and I will come along for the ride. And I think that's so important, not to impose with our students, especially women, any student, but a woman who's going through and experiencing things differently, allow them to use their voice to describe how they're feeling in that moment.